walk into the restaurant.
I grabbed a vase and I smashed it over the back of his
one
head.
of those girls on the poster. Papa, did you enjoy the striptease?
He was a liar. He had lied to me about everything.
I think I became a lesbian that night.
Giving me a heart attack. And then he laughed.
The scream is powerful.
We're all gonna die. We're all going to die.
My daughters are giving birth to larvae, and it's my birthday.
I'm just gonna tell it like it is.
And ultimately, they handcuff us. They throw us in the back of a truck. And the whole time, I'm beginning to start to bawl my eyes out and begging them to tell me what's going on and where am I going and what have I done.
That's when he told me that he was leading a double life. And that when I wasn't around, he would sort of pick up girls and that he felt that we should move into a commune.
Tell it like it is.
When I was 21 years old and graduated from university, I decided to go to South Korea to become a teacher. And at the time, it was just a really, really lucrative thing to move to Asia. They paid quite a bit a month to teach English to Korean kids. Quite a popular business.
I was a student at the University of Montreal. We're talking here about the 60s and the early 60s. And there was a fellow in my class who asked me to go skiing. This was about February. We skied all day and we came back on the bus. And that night, he asked me to marry him. And I said yes.
When I first arrived in Korea, when I first flew into my town, my principal and assistant principal picked me up. And I just remember this very stern woman, you know, like buttoned up tight and very, very serious. And she just wound up being a really unforgiving woman. I had a contract that said I didn't work weekends. I had a contract that said I never had to pay any security deposit or anything on any apartment. And all of these things were done. I had to work Saturday mornings. I had to pay a security deposit. And I would go to her with my contract and I said, you know what, you sign this and I sign this and I'm not really doing this. And she said, yes, you are. You are. She'd walk by my classroom and see kids, you know, not being perfect, not necessarily being monsters. And she'd walk into my classroom, smack them on the head, and almost insist that I should as well. Me and some of the other teachers nicknamed her the Wicked Witch of the Pacific Rim. That kind of environment became really, really repressive.
I guess I was attracted to him because he was older and taller and very different from who I was. It was an impetuous decision, to say the least. And we were married 3 months later.
There are still about 35,000 American soldiers still in South Korea following the Korean War. So my area has a lot of discontent. There was a time where it became kind of glaringly obvious that this kind of discontent was going to be unlivable.
4 years into the marriage, I had a baby girl. We moved to the States because my then husband was doing a doctorate, and we moved to Berkeley. And Berkeley in 1969, 1970 was the progressive place, and it was renowned as being avant-gardiste and free.
Socially and culturally, we felt so ostracized, and so, especially the women, felt really, really oppressed, so we stuck together. A couple of them, specifically this American girl, Jennifer, had this unbelievable confidence about her right to be there, and you knew that if you were ever going to go anywhere with her, you'd get there, and there would be, you know, no concerns about trying to get a taxi or trying to figure out how to say this, because she did have, you know, wherewithal with, you know, that looking back might have been a little bit arrogant. I would spend time with her because it really was, I was attracted to that kind of confidence at the time because I simply didn't have it. So we'd gone to this karaoke bar and had a really good time. We were coming at about 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and Jennifer was reaching around in her bag looking for her cigarettes. So I held her bag while she reached in and found them, took one out and lit it. And instantly when she lit it, we felt these 2 hands on our shoulders. And we turned around and we looked up at these 2 unbelievably scary South Korean soldiers who were carrying machine guns, who basically looked at us and said, "You're under arrest."
And one morning, my then husband got up and he was looking at me, standing over me. And I looked at him and said, "Good morning, how are you?" And he simply looked at me and said, "You know, I don't believe in marriage anymore. And I don't believe in fatherhood anymore. And I'm not sure if I believe in God anymore."
And I kind of thought it was a joke, and I looked around and I started laughing, and I said, no, you arrested. And then once I saw how serious they were, I just began to freak out because I had no idea what I could have possibly done. And this girl that I was with that I barely knew, she's freaking out and saying, well, I'm an American, I don't have to listen to you, which just really isn't helping things considering the political environment that we were in.
I had to sort of let it seep in. And I looked at him straight in the eye and I said, and you never thought maybe you could have said this to me a couple of years back before we decided to have a child? That's when he told me that he was leading a double life. And that when I wasn't around, he would sort of pick up girls and that he felt that we should move into a commune. And I wasn't in that world at all. I couldn't understand why he would want that.
I kept saying, why? And what happened? And nobody's talking to me. They're pretending as if I'm not speaking the Korean I'm speaking. They're not going to speak to me in English. And ultimately, they handcuff us. They throw us in the back of a truck. And the whole time, I'm beginning to start to bawl my eyes out and begging them to tell me what's going on and where am I going and what have I done.
I thought I'd done something wrong. I thought I must not be a very good person if I couldn't make a man happy. And I thought, no matter what happens, I'm really going to stick this out. People just don't separate, and I had married for life.
They separate us. They fingerprint me. They take my picture, and they take her in another direction, and they take me towards what is a cell, really, which does not look like any North American cell that you've ever seen on television. It's like this hollowed out concrete wall, and it just kind of looks like this cave. And there's a hole in one corner that I suppose is meant to be your washroom. And they throw me in there, and they pull the bars shut, and there's no lights in there. It's just completely dark. I remember hearing water dripping the whole time I was in there, this rhythmic kind of dripping, and not knowing where it's coming from. And I can hear Korean voices, and I'm trying to yell at them in the Korean that I knew, and they wouldn't respond to me. And then when I tried to speak to them in English, they would say no English. And every now and again, they would throw like a bowl of rice underneath the bars, and I wouldn't touch it. And then randomly, Korean soldiers would walk by with their, billy club type things in their hand and run it along the bars and just kind of tormenting me. And they used to just say things over and over. Say goodbye to your mommy. You stay here forever. And all I just kept thinking was, you stay here forever. You stay here forever.
But a few weeks down the road, it was quite evident to me that the person I was living with had no interest in me and no interest in the baby. We came home for Christmas, and I had a big decision to make. I have one suitcase, no money, no furniture, not even a crib. So I decided not to go back. A good friend takes me in Ottawa, a young couple with 2 kids, and they take me in and say, listen, we'll help you. And all the while, I haven't told my family. I'm just, in French you would say, trop gêné, too ashamed.
I just sat there thinking about my family and about my life, and that in this entire world, and every single person that I know in this world, not one person has any idea where I am or will ever have any idea forever where I am. I have no idea what I'm doing here, and I have no tools for which to improve my situation at all. And I just sat like that with this dripping water and this noise around me thinking, this is it. What else is there?
Tell it like it is. Ooh.
From there on, I found a job. I went into broadcasting through a friend of mine. And the noise, the smell of the radio studio, I just thought, my God, this is heaven. I wasn't making much money. I was able to start paying the apartment by myself. I was able to have a good neighbor who babysat Elaine. I'd been with the broadcaster for a good year, and the director came to me and said, listen, would you be interested in producing the weekend show? And I said, I could try.
So after a day and a half, I was allowed to make a phone call, and I travel on a British passport, so I phoned the British Embassy. And I spoke to this man, and At first, he got quite a chuckle out of my charge because at this point, I'd been told that I'd been charged with aiding and abetting public female smoking. Because in my town, it was illegal for women to smoke, and Jennifer had smoked, and I had assisted her by holding her bag. I asked him, what's going to happen now? And he said, well, I can consider sending you a lawyer, but let's wait because I think it might be a prank.
So I'd been in the show about a couple of months. The technical director asked to see me. Well, he said I was called by the cleaning people at midnight to see what was in your office. I said, what do you mean what was in my office? Well, he says, Maria, I hate to tell you this, but I guess your good ratings have really disturbed somebody or somebody's. Somebody shit on your desk, Marie. To me, it was unbelievable.
And I just couldn't believe that this guy was insisting this possibly could be a prank, like considering where I was, this horror of a place I was, thinking I was never leaving, and he was suggesting to me that it might be a prank. The jail sentence was a year in prison, and that smoking was actually 2 years in prison. And so he said he would do his best to get a lawyer to me, and we would begin to sort this out. And I went back to my cell, and I sat there, and I thought, well, okay, it's a year. I can tell my parents a year. They'll see me again in a year.
I guess I was so involved with being a good researcher that I had not realized that there were so many people around who wanted to be a producer.
The next thing I remember happening is that, you know, I heard a lot of yelling and I heard some English voices, which really, really excited me. And I was trying to listen and kind of strain to hear what people were saying. And they were male voices. And then as it turned out, they came down to my cell, they opened the bars, and they said, you go. And when I got to the lobby, to the area where I'd been checked in, there were 4 American soldiers, and there was Jennifer. And one of the soldiers was her boyfriend. So she phoned him on her phone call. Basically, these 4 American soldiers in fatigues come down, had a little rumble with the Korean soldiers, and they were letting us go.
Got a call at the office from the boss of my boss. And the boss of the boss for me is nearly a figment of my imagination. I've never met him, and I'm wondering, why would he want to see me? He says, please have a seat. You know, this is not a pleasant meeting.
And I ran towards Jennifer, and I was so excited, and I remember putting my arms up because I was going to hug her, and I was so excited, and she was very, very cold to me. And she was like, what? And I said, this is over. Like, we get to leave now. And she said to me, Christ, this has happened to me 4 times in 2 years. And I just remember being probably the most angry that I've ever been in my life, that this woman who I'd been arrested for because she smoked, who made things 10 times worse because she was mouthing off. We drove in this truck together towards the prison, and at any time, she could have said to me, well, you know, don't worry, you'll be fine. You'll be out in a couple days. Instead, she just let me sit there for 2 days stewing in the fact that I might be there for the rest of my life.
The complaint has been lodged by a union that you're sleeping with the director and that you're doing this, you did this to get the producer's job. He took me totally by surprise, and my first reaction was, oh my God, please, give me better taste.
And after that, I just decided there's no way that as a woman or as a person that I could live in this country where this type of thing happened to me. I just couldn't do it. Regardless of having a contract, I was going to break it, which is illegal in Korea. I'm running. What that meant was leaving in the middle of the night, packing yourself up, and the next morning they just noticed you're not at school.
From that day on, I never dated a person that I worked with. I was very careful in establishing a wall between my social life and my work life. But the one thing I did do very clearly is I didn't change who I was. I couldn't.
There was a lot of resentment. They were having a really, really bad time economically, and they accused people of coming over here to South Korea, making a lot of money, and then leaving when time was bad. There was a girl who was at my school before me who after 2 days decided she hated it, left, and they went to the airport, got her, took her luggage and everything she had. So they were being very, very suspicious about everybody who was trying to get out during this really bad economical time. And so I phoned my mother and I told her that I was leaving, and I told her that I was leaving in some kind of dodgy circumstance and that, you know, it may not be the smoothest trip home.
Tell it like it is.
I was asked to produce another show, and this show required specialized researchers. One of the researchers that I had hired, his name is Bernard. My first reaction is, my God, he looks like a nice person. He's good looking, but he looks like a nice person. So one Friday night, I got a call at home, and it's Bernard, and he's asking me to go to a concert with him the next Friday. And I said, Bernard, I really appreciate your call, and I'm very touched by your invitation, but one of the things I never do is mix dating with work. I really try to keep these two lives totally separate. And he said, I understand that. That's no problem.
I went to the airport in the middle of the night in kind of a real secretive kind of mode. And ultimately I got caught. I got caught at customs, wondering why I was leaving so early. I got this bizarre tap on my shoulder. And I turn around and there's another soldier or cop with an automated weapon in his hand. And he just said, come with me. And I was sitting there under this like one light bulb. I sat there for close to about 4 hours being screamed at in Korean and broken English. And me screaming back at them, me crying my eyes out and saying, I'm not hiding anything.
So on Monday when I came into my office, there's an envelope on my desk. And I opened the envelope. There's a typewritten letter. And it's, Dear Marie. And it's a resignation letter from Bernard. I can't imagine what's going through his head. So I go into the office where the 4 researchers are sitting. And I say, can I see you for a minute, Bernard? Well, I said, Bernard, you're not going to resign over a date. How can you give this up, this new career? And he looked at me straight in the eye and said, because one day I'm going to marry you. And he turned around and walked out of my office.
And they said, you're not leaving until we speak to your principal, which obviously would have been the end for me if they talked to her. And I gave them a phone number of my apartment where I knew nobody would be. And they phoned it all afternoon. And they were growing more and more hostile with me. And they were screaming at me and screaming at me. You broke a contract. You're going to jail. That's it. And they would just say that to you over and over and over again. And I know that there isn't another flight for 5 days. And I'm in Seoul, and I don't know anybody in Seoul. But I knew financially I could not afford to hang around in Seoul for 5 days. At the end, ultimately, with about 20 minutes to spare, I just said to them, I demand to speak to the British Embassy, which is kind of silly because obviously I have no cards to play, but I just demanded it. And one of them looked at me and they said, but you go to Canada. I said, yeah, I go to Canada, but I'm British.
I thought, my God, I can't believe this. That night, I went back to the neighbors where Helene was being babysat after school, and we always had coffee when I would come in from work. Her name was Francine. So I tell her about the incidents, and while I'm telling her, her husband walks in. So we're sitting down, and Francine says, you've got to tell Raymond what happened. So I tell Raymond what happened.
This very serious and scary man came in, and he had the most medals, and he looked at me, and he looked at my passport, and they just threw it across the table, and he said, you go. And I ran as fast as I could towards the terminal, and I knew that the plane was leaving in about 15 minutes. And when I got onto the plane, I remember feeling so anxious that we hadn't taken off. You know, let's get moving, let's get moving.
And so Raymond very seriously looked at me straight in the eye and said, Marie, do me a favor. Go out on one date with him. Just one date. Don't do it for yourself. Don't do it for him. Do it for me. Just give him a chance.
And I was sitting there, and every one of those minutes felt like just an hour, praying that the plane was going to start moving. And then ultimately it did, and it started to move. And it really wasn't until it got into the air that I kind of just sat down and felt like I'd caught my breath for the first time in weeks. And I begin to look around, and I see about 14 or so other people that look like me. It turned out that all of them had done the exact same thing that I had all left in the middle of the night, had all been stopped at customs, had all been interrogated. And I mean, obviously there was some sense of like, I'm not alone in this. This kind of thing has happened to other people. There was this one guy, and I'll never forget him. I know his name was Jim, and he had khaki pants on. He had this massive stain in his pants. And as we're talking, he kind of points to the stain in his pants, and he goes, I'll admit it, I pissed my pants. Like, I was scared to death.
So the next day at lunch, I saw Bernard alone, and I said, if you still want, we could go to the concert on Friday night. And he says, great. Nothing more than that. And that night at the concert, I knew I would marry this man.
After I arrived and I did the whole customs thing, and the only thing left was baggage, and I could see my parents, you know, through the glass, and I'd waved, and I'd kind of started to cry and said, well, I'm not going to cry again. And I was waiting for baggage, and of course my baggage doesn't come out. And so I go over to the baggage claim, and they said, actually, we know. They made a couple phone calls. They said, we know exactly where your luggage is. It got left. It's in Gimpo Airport. It's in Korea. And they said, if you just fill this out, handed me this pen. And I went, you know what? Forget it. I don't want my name written down anywhere. I don't want my name next to the word South Korea. I don't want anybody to look for anything in my name. Nothing. That's it. It's over. They can keep it. And we'll start fresh from here.
He drove me home. I invited him for coffee. We had a cup of coffee at the kitchen table like I'm sitting here today. And he went home. We didn't even kiss or... It's just that I knew that he'd call back, and he knew that I'd say yes. 27 years later, I know it's the best decision I could have made. There's a big fly around I can hear it. I know. And it's a big black fly. Just perfume will do it every time.
I just lost it. I just started bawling my eyes out. And my dad's looking at me like, what is your problem? Freaking out. And I just said, I have to tell you something. I have to tell you the story.